Welcome to the On Purpose podcast, where together we will learn from personal stories and explore thought-provoking topics, all with one goal in mind: living a more purposeful life. Welcome to the On Purpose podcast. This week, our episode is with a guest. I'm excited to share his story with you. He's a visionary leader. He's passionate about driving positive change through social enterprise with a background in business development and a heart for impact. He's been instrumental in bridging the gap between purpose-driven organizations and sustainable growth. This week's guest, Paul Burani, is someone I was excited to talk with because he has different themes that come up as my research for him: social entrepreneurship, social impact. And one of the things I'm really excited to share with you all and talk about is his belief and his experience that Gen Z is going to be great role models for future problem solving, bridging social impact and technology, and where we go as a society in the future. So sit back, relax, enjoy this conversation with Paul, and then please remember YouTube's now doing podcasts, so hop over to YouTube, get on the On Purpose podcast, to subscribe to our video. It doesn't cost you anything. Subscribe to the channel, like it, share it. Just help us continue to grow our brand so that we become the most impactful podcast in the world. So sit back and enjoy our discussion with Paul, and as always, thanks for being here. Paul, welcome to the On Purpose podcast, my friend. How you doing today?
I'm good, Jerrod. How about yourself?
Blessed, my friend. I'm excited to talk with you and get a deeper understanding of some of the stuff you work in. Because as I was researching things like social entrepreneurship and social impact problems of technology, I started seeing themes here, and that is that you're trying to solve problems potentially before they become big problems, and you're trying to work on things and ahead of a curve instead of waiting until we're behind it and then we're reacting. I really was interested in that. I got to be honest, I had to look up some of those terms. I was like, what the hell does this even mean?
Yeah, well, it's I think I've been lucky enough to get a lot of good advice from wise people over the years, and something that always stuck with me. My grandmother used to use a lot of proverbs, and she used to talk about how a stitch in time saves nine. Which to me means, we know problems all around us, right? Social problems that don't seem to be going away. There's no time like the present to fix them, right? The longer you wait, the bigger and more complex those solutions are going to be. And so I feel like, in the business world, especially in the venture community where a lot of people are starting up amazing businesses, it's a real engine for innovation. And that doesn't just mean innovation that shows up on the balance sheet, but it's people, it's social entrepreneurs who have a desire to make a different kind of impact with all of their work.
Yeah, no, I love it. And one of the things that I want to make sure we get to talk to is your thoughts about Gen Z becoming the good problem-solving role models. And I want to dive into that because I love generational studies, and that's one of the things I really enjoy reading about. But what I don't enjoy is when people just bash generations, right? Like one generation is just, oh, they're this and that and terrible. And instead of looking at each generation brings their own strengths to the table, and then on the flip side, we bring a weakness. But I do think that's fascinating, and I want to get to how they're going to be the role models for problem solving and some of this stuff.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of firepower, a lot of latent force in that entire generation. They've grown up with the sort of existential crises that you or I or other people have on our minds, but maybe don't act with the same urgency. And Gen Z, if I'm going to generalize, they're growing up, they're inheriting a world, and they're going to have to live in it much longer than you or I, right? And so I think they bring a different kind of energy to problem solving.
Oh, I love it. All right, before we get too deep into that, I got to warm you up, Paul. This is, I got to know some important stuff about you and get you warmed up before we start hitting this purposeful content. You ready?
Let's do it.
All right, my friend. First question, coffee or tea?
Coffee, all the way. I had to give up coffee for 4 months recently, and I switched to tea. I was very open-minded about it. I said I could do this. Every day I was like, this.
All right. Well, are you back on coffee? Everything worked out okay? You could come back? What kind of
Yes.
coffee are you drinking? What's your favorite drink?
Uh, I like dark roast. I do French press. I grind it fresh every morning. We also have an espresso machine. So if I get frisky and I do a second coffee, I'll switch to espresso.
Awesome. All right. Mixed meal, brunch or dinner?
Mm. If it's only those two, I go brunch.
Brunch. See, I used to be a brunch guy, and the more I ask this question, the more I like dinner. I like a early dinner nowadays.
Well, over time we change, and there's something to be said for not having like a huge cinder block in your stomach while you're trying to sleep. So I relate to that.
Yeah, I don't know too, man. Like I hit 50, I'm 51 now, and like they start giving you discounts. In a few more years, I can get discounts if I go to dinner at like 4 o'clock. So maybe I'm just pre-warming up for that.
Those savings add up over time.
All right. Sunrises or sunsets?
Rises.
Why?
Um, well, I like both of them. I
Yeah.
think they're both beautiful and inspiring. Um, but when the sun's rising, I actually have the mental energy to pay attention to it. When the sun's setting, there's too much going on. I rarely notice.
Yeah, I love it. Yeah, it's funny I just switched up these warm up questions like a couple episodes ago, and it's funny the sunrise sunsets. Really, people have kind of deep thoughts on that, so I enjoy that one. All right,
Yes.
reading a book or listening to a book?
I want to say the former, but reality, it's the latter. I take my dog on long walks. That's how I get my audiobook consumption in. I think, there's a place for both of them, but
Yeah.
I do more of the latter.
Okay. All right, you got to get your mind right. You got something weighing on you. You got to come up with a solution. You go into silence or music?
Normally silence,
Okay.
although there's amazing stuff out there, some music that is engineered to drive concentration. And so I've been experimenting with that some more.
How's that been?
Awesome. At first, this was like maybe a decade ago, I learned about this company called
Yep.
focusatwill.com. They're still around. But I think they've been copied left, right, and center. Certain types of music, classical or like drum and bass, things that have a certain repetition, are really engineered to keep that to hold your focus. And I'll test it like for 2 hours. I'll put that on,
Yeah.
and I really get into flow a lot quicker. I stay there. I'm more happy with the output of my work. So I would say it's going pretty well.
Oh wow. Okay, so you're pretty mindful on some of this stuff. You're
No, it's I love life hacking and finding ways
yes.
to just get like incremental improvements in my life. So yeah, that was one of my breakthroughs.
Okay. Interesting. Yeah, no, life hacks are good. If we can get for me at least, if I can get more productive in a shorter amount of time to free up to go do other stuff I really want to do, then it's a win.
Yep.
So where do you sit on the AI stuff? How much AI are you using in your daily life?
I always think it's a lot until I talk to other people and I'm like, wow, am I getting left behind here? I do a lot because I was an early adopter of search engines. I've worked within search technology, selling it as a service, selling it as a product, and over time, watch behavior change to where human beings are just getting a lot more conversational with this technology. And so that's kind of been my journey, is watching it as an evolution of the search engine. I've played around a little bit with APIs. I definitely follow what's happening in the news. AI sort of influencing policy,
Mm,
AI in elections, that kind of stuff. A little scary. Gives you
sure.
gives you the creeps a little bit, but I would say I'm on board. I'm a believer. My optimist view of AI is that it's going to really augment our own creativity. It's going to re reinstate right brainers in their rightful place in society as leaders, and it's going to farm out a lot of the rote work that we just have outgrown in this day and age. And the trick is, can we adapt our labor markets and our workforce training and all of these kind of ancillary functions so that we don't leave people behind in the process? So I'm
Yeah.
optimistic with a lot of caveats.
Interesting. Don't can you draw a parallel to saying like I don't know when we created automated corn harvesters for a lack of a detailed term, and everybody's like, "Oh my God! Now all the people that pick corn by hand are going to be out of work." Yet they found work within the industry, right? Like we kind of adjust to a new technology. You think you can draw somewhat of a parallel like that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think look at the wheel, right? The wheel was an incredible innovation for its time. What did the wheel do? It people who were carrying stuff on their backs learned how to hold a cart or guide a horse, right? And that was, that's a new skill. It didn't
Hmm.
happen overnight. But I don't think that just, I think too often we rush to judgment and we say that um, technology is going to invalidate jobs. It's going to make human capabilities that used to be relevant completely irrelevant with no hope for replacement. And I think that argument overlooks the fact that people are very resourceful and
Mm.
people have survival instincts. And so if I'm an accountant and I just got, my job is about to get completely blindsided by AI, there are a lot of different directions I can take to either use that technology more productively to augment my own capabilities. Maybe instead of serving 10 clients, I can now serve 100. Or maybe I sort of pivot into a more tangential area where I do use other parts of my brain, financial analysis, strategic planning, that sort of thing. So I think we just, we get locked into our comfort zone a
Yeah.
lot, and that's human nature. But I'm optimistic, provided we put the supports in place, that it's going to be a net positive for society.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting because I shifted because when it first came out, I was completely against it. I was like, "There's no way you're good." When this first came out, I was
With
like,
my
"Yeah, you
water.
good? You need a
I'm
towel?"
good. No, I'm good.
I was like, "There's no way this is good for me." Then I had a conversation with my good friends, and he's like, "The only people that AI won't be good for are those that refuse to use AI, right? You refuse to figure
Right.
out how it." So then I switched, and now AI is huge for the podcast, right? Like when it analyzes episodes for SEO optimization and which parts are going to relate to. I mean, I'm like, okay, that's stuff I don't have to do.
Yeah,
You know,
exactly.
so it frees up, so I can go hike more. I can go do the human things that I really enjoy doing, versus a lot of, like you said, some of the technical stuff that you feel like you've outgrown.
That's right.
Yeah, interesting. All right, you feeling warmed up there? We even got some AI early in the episode.
Absolutely. I
So
guarantee it's going to come back.
um, so I wanted to start off with one of the statements you sent in your questionnaire when we are getting ready for the show, and that is that you want to be the best example you can for your children to prepare them for the world and to live up to your best human potential. Talk me, what does that look like to you, and what does that mean? Like, what are you doing to fulfill that?
Well, it's always a work in progress, and it
Yeah,
will be till the day I die. I mean, it starts with knowing yourself and knowing the gifts you've been given. Some of them are innate, some of them have been handed to you, right? So, um, in terms of the innate gifts, right? I've got a brain that's capable of certain things. Some of them I can do better than others. Some things I can't, and I have to
right.
catch up. And I've also been given more tangible gifts, right? I mean, my father grew up in post-war Italy, amid rubble from World War II. He didn't have a lot of opportunity staring him in the face, but he went and hustled for it and got himself to a point where by the time he built a family, we all started at a different level than he did.
Sure.
And so whether, it's innate gifts or things you've been sort of tangibly handed, I think that is at the foundation of every person's responsibility to do the most with it. It's not a crime to be gifted or to be wealthy or to be, privileged in any way. The crime is if we don't
Mm,
make absolute most of it, because then you look around and you say, God, look at these people hustling here all day, every day who don't have that.
mhm.
How can I look them in the eye, right?
Yeah.
Knowing that I'm not doing my absolute best.
Mm, yeah, 100% agree with that. What does preparing your children for the future look like to you?
Mm. Uh, that is a daily exercise of introspection because I find that this world is changing so fast.
Right?
Uh, our very concept of the future is becoming harder and harder to really understand. I mean, just look at the surge of lifestyle changes that come from inventions, modern inventions like the smartphone.
Yeah.
15 years ago didn't exist, or 20 years ago didn't exist. And now parenting in the smartphone age, well, that's different. There's no
Yeah.
playbook for that. The older generation has absolutely no guidance for this generation how to actually do that. So we have to accept that change is coming fast. We can't anticipate it. But I think it comes from consciousness. So impart on our children and the people around us, even if they're not our children, impart on them a desire to be informed and clued in about what's happening, and to practice their citizenship in a way that is not just taking but also giving, right? So
Mm,
contributing to dialogue, contributing to progress, and feeling some responsibility and sense of duty to do that. So I mean, those are some of the things, when the kids are young, you try to lead by example. When they're older, you have to prompt them a bit more, but
sure.
you can also get a little further.
Yeah. What about listening to that? One of the key things I just kept hearing in my head is resilience, right? And your father's generation, our generation, I think we got resilience from hands-on things, right? We didn't have smartphones. We were outside a lot. We were problem solving. Like we fell down, we got hurt, we got cut. We're resilient. How in an age now where you're right, smartphones run things and there's a lot less at times a lot less human interaction, a lot less just being out and being a kid like I was accustomed to being. How do we teach them resilience in that age? What does resilience, or what does even resilience look like in this new age versus what it looked like for us, right?
God, I mean, I lay awake at night asking the same question. It's ironic you're asking me for an answer here, Jerrod. But I mean, how do you do it? I think again, it goes back to leading by example, um, right? I mean, showing vulnerability,
Mm,
um, and getting them to kind of see every every face of daily life. So my kids are 11 and 9 at this point. Um, my wife and I both are a lot less, um, what's the word, guarded with our emotions around like things that are happening in the workplace, in the family. So if something is frustrating us about our work or our careers, just have it out. Just put it out in the open and own it.
yeah,
Explicit about it. There's no need to tiptoe around it. So I think it's modeling that, and it's also, um, I think, teaching the importance of not rushing to judgment
mm,
when we stumble, right? It's very quick. It's very easy to have a kind of knee-jerk reaction to life's challenges. Uh, you know, my daughter, she hustles every morning to get out at 7:30 to walk to school with a group. If she misses it, it can have a domino effect on her day.
sure,
And so at 7:27, when little things are not neatly in place, for that 7:30 departure, she'll sometimes kind of go off the rails, and it's
yeah,
our job to take a deep breath. All right, what you're talking about here is like two or three things that we can fix in the next minute. You're
mm,
really going to be okay. Take a deep breath. It's not so bad.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I love that you're sharing frustrations at workplace and stuff, with the children, because I think, especially as guys, we generationally carried this. Everything's always good. And there's certain things I just don't share with the family because they can't handle it, and you bottle it up. And then we see now. I think, at least speaking on my end, my generationally, I'm able to see how that didn't age well for my grandparents or my parents. That keeping everything in and just holding it back, and yeah, maybe sharing is a great way to do so. At least we're processing, we're showing them that not everything's perfect, right? And just because dad goes to work and makes a certain amount of money, or mom goes to work and makes money, we have this house and we have all the things. There's still struggles that go on inside of every human being, and it's okay to talk about them.
That's right. Goes back to that vulnerability.
Yeah. Now that's good. I think that's awesome. You're doing that. And how do you? So you're much more into the tech thing. How do you balance the tech with your kids? Like, talk to me about that, because I obviously my kids are older, so smartphones were just starting kind of when they were getting of age, and I didn't have near as many worries probably as today's parents do. So how do you balance that?
Um, Balance is the pursuit, and I'll say, how do I approach achieving balance? First of all, it fundamentally it comes from my wife and I just being in complete lockstep on our values and priorities.
Yeah.
It helps that a lot of other parents in our community are on the same page. It would help a lot more if all of them were, but beggars can't be choosers. We love where we live
Right.
here, outside of New York, lovely little suburban town. It's great. We find that there are enough like-minded people that we're not just total, you know, we're not painted as complete monsters by our children just because we limit their screen time.
Right.
Um, we try to lean into the shades of gray a little bit. So, for example, if they reach their daily allotment of screen time, um, for a well-timed completion of a chore, we're happy to extend the time a little bit. Or for certain content, right? Like my son loves to watch animal videos. He loves wild animals. He's 9 years old. He's got 2 or 3 channels that he follows pretty religiously, and he knows a lot about. He's got like an encyclopedic knowledge of all these wild animals and what they do and their habitats and all that. That's wholesome stuff.
Right.
That's very different from a lot of the other garbage that you can get online. And so we try to reward, or create little micro rewards, with that behavior. And I think it's really important to get on their level. We actually created in our family, we created a virtual currency. So there was a time when Bitcoin was the only virtual currency
Yeah.
that was mind, and so we came up with Chitcoin, which was our version of that. The exchange rate is stable; it's always 50 cents. So that makes helps to teach basic arithmetic, which was important at the time.
Yeah.
And then I have a little app on my phone, and when my son gets ready for his shower, with maximum of one prompt, he earns a chick coin. If my daughter takes out the recycling the way she's supposed to every week, she earns a chick coin, and it adds up. I prefer doing that than just handing a $10 bill at the end of
Yeah.
the week and saying your allowance, which is how I was incentivized to do chores as a kid. In this case, it's a little more entrepreneurial. I
Yeah.
want them to feel like, you know, I'll be happy, Jerrod, when one day either of them comes to me and says, I want more tasks that I can do to earn
Mm.
Chitcoin. And then maybe even, Nirvana would be if they actually present the tasks, and I get to approve some of them, and then
Yeah.
we implement.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. Yeah. No, that's fantastic. Chit coins. When are they hitting the market so we can invest in those?
God, if it doesn't crash, thankfully it's been pretty resilient to inflation, but that's predicated on money coming.
That's funny. And I want to follow up. So I love those stories, that one of the things I saw that you had mentioned somewhere is that you want people to understand the world that lies between the extremes. And I think that's so critical because everywhere you go right now, it's an extreme view on one side or the other of everything. How do we get people to, one, I think, recognize the majority of people still think things are in the middle, and that it's okay to have an opinion that things are in the middle without being blasted by either side. Like if you're not on either side, you're not loud enough. How do we get to a point like that?
Oh, you're asking the hardball questions.
Hey, you're a professional, my friend. I'm coming first. I'm trying to
Right.
learn.
Yeah, you're right. No, you're right. You should, you've got a platform to ask these kinds of questions. You absolutely should. I mean, I think that there are a couple of ways. One is I think we all need to educate ourselves on how it got to this point. Um, there are a lot of right answers to that question, so I'm not going to pretend like I have the only right answer,
Sure.
or even that my answer is right. But I'll give you my version, which is I think we underestimate the impact that modern media has had on um, basically manufacturing extremity in our opinions.
Yes.
So, as an undergrad, I studied communications. I learned about how things work in the broadcast world. Uh, and then for probably 15 years of my career, I worked in media and advertising where I saw how that all gets commercialized. And that's the dark side of it, is especially when you look at modern technology, you look at all of the, sort of algorithms that dominate the internet. There's your AI. I told you it was coming back,
Yeah.
but AI, also, I mean, just picking up where all those other technologies have left off. Um, there's no money in the middle, right? Like
Mm.
there's, if you're in the news media, like it or not, you're part of an engine that has to push people to one side or the other to play them off each other in order to keep people coming back so you can monetize eyeballs. Now, I think it's fantastic that a lot of reputable publications have done their best to try and augment that with alternative revenue models, like the New York Times just offering a subscription, and they've managed to grow that year in and year out. It's nothing compared to their ad business, and they're just one outlet among many. But I think that unfortunately, we're living with the effects of a model that has been tuned to push us to one extreme or the other. And I mean, look at the knife edge elections that I think we're going to be stuck with for a long time. There's going to be in the United States, there's going to be 6 to 8 states every year that just determine basically the direction of our economy, our society, and in large part, the direction of the global order. And it's like a few tens of thousands of people times 6 to 8 states. It's crazy what we've created.
Right.
So I think we have to understand that. I think the second piece is we have to bring back some other virtues. And
Mm.
by that I mean civility. That's really the one that comes to mind for me, because a lot of times when our sort of fight or flight instincts are triggered, what do? We look to make a fist. We look for the biggest weapon we can find at arm's length. And too often, especially in this kind of pseudo-anonymous world of the internet, what used to be just a stick is now like a club
Yeah.
and battering ram. Like we've just found ways to get so nasty with one another. I'm amazed that we've lost a sense of sort of basic decency with strangers. And I think if we were to somehow claw that back and reinstate civility among strangers, I think what we would find is there is room for discourse in the middle where we can hear a point we vehemently disagree with and not hate the person it's coming
Mm.
from. So how long is it going to take? That's a whole other question, but I think you got to start somewhere.
Yeah. No, I love it. And I think it ties back to one of your earlier answers of growing up with the privileges we have and the security we have and not living in rubble of a post-world war, but a safe environment has allowed people to act in ways they wouldn't act if their survival depended on their neighbor. Right? If we as a community had to come together, and you see it every now and then after a tragedy, right? A community comes together and everybody loves each other for a while, and then when it wears off, we go back. But I also, to your point, think that it's people like you and hopefully like myself that feel a responsibility to earn what we've been giving, right? To live up to the opportunity that I can be on a beach in Baja, Mexico, and with the modern technology, have conversations with you in New York, and then share these with people around the world to hopefully understand that when you get past all the information coming at you, people are still genuinely nice, and they're genuinely willing to talk with you and to learn from you and to teach you and to learn from you. And that's my responsibility, right? In this time with AI and all that, is to figure out, how do I get this to make people more human again? How do I get this to make people want to go, man, Paul, talk to me about this thing that you're involved in, because I don't know anything about it.
Yeah.
And that's my hope. Maybe I'm naive, right? Maybe I'm naive, and maybe I see the rose-colored half-full glass when others see it half empty. But I think that is ultimately where our technology pays dividends, and that we can free up time to have more in-depth conversations.
Yeah, I think that's always the vision, right? Free up time for A, B, C, whatever it might
Right.
be, right? And that's what we told ourselves we would do with the smartphone. It's going to save all this time. And of course, we're just going to take all that free time and we're going to go and plant flowers and stare at clouds and pick raspberries, right? And that just didn't happen. Unfortunately, the modern world took all that free time and just crammed more stuff down our throats. But I think that every individual can make a decision to do things differently, right? And if you're naive, then so am I. And I think that there's a place for naivete in this world. It's not the vice that maybe it used to be. I think naivete is the new nirvana.
Really interesting. Yeah, I haven't thought of it that way, but I think, Paul, for us being at a certain age where there's probably more life behind us than ahead of us, right? Like, I hit 50 and I'm like, okay, the average age of Americans is now, I think, like 78 or 82 maybe. I don't have time to hate.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have time to argue about politics that is just so evil. I don't want to spend if I meet you one time, Paul, I want to learn, who is Paul? Why did our paths cross right now? And I think that's why the next generation is so powerful, as they have lived life much more curious and less conforming to rules that maybe we just accept of this is the way it's supposed to be. I go to college, I get a job, I buy a house, I put up a fence, I never talk to my neighbors, I have a couple kids, I retire, I pass on this wealth to my kids, but did I live? Did I write my book? Did I learn to play the ukulele? Like, I had never played an instrument until I hit 50, and I was like, I don't know why I don't know how to play music. Like, I love music, so I got a ukulele to learn how to play music at 50 because I didn't have the courage to do it when I was younger. Maybe I didn't have the time, whatever the case may be. What do you think on that? Do you think it's because that next generation questions so much more than we did that they're going to be, quite honestly, better problem solvers?
Better. I don't know. Different for sure. I think the world will push them to look at things differently. They're going to have access to information and perspectives that generally generationally we lack, right?
Mm.
But I think it's also going to come back to role models. So I think, some people like your kids will look at your example and probably admire the fact that you picked up a ukulele halfway through your life, and that might inspire them, to do the same, or to at least do something similarly bold. Um, my mother for many years was an English teacher because we lived abroad, and that was a good career for her while having young kids. And then at one point, we get set up back in the United States, and she pursued a degree in nutrition, and that was her career and still is. She's, in a sense, never retired.
Right.
And, I mean, I see so many people, and having worked in ed tech in recent years and starting to see, looking at labor market data and talking to economists and thought leaders in education, we're in a golden age where, compared to a generation or two ago, like, mobility is at an all-time high. You can do whatever the hell you want.
Yep.
And it's being destigmatized. And you can, if you have ideas, the gaps that ordinarily you would face. How do I acquire the knowledge? How am I going to meet people that can get me into this industry? Those solutions are all out there. They're all at arm's length. That's
Right.
the beauty of technology, right?
Right.
And so I think that's really inspiring. That's part of why I'm excited about what Gen Z is going to do for our society, because rather than follow a playbook that says, you have to check these boxes, and then you've got three options, and you're going to land on one of them and ride off into the sunset. I mean, that's like what our, parents and grandparents heard. They're going to do whatever the hell they want. They're going to do what makes them happy. And when we're happy, we are our best selves. And that means we get the best of our head, the best of our heart. And I think it's going to translate into a lot of impact and work that matters.
I love it. I 100% agree. And I think, Sherman, do they have a better sense of personal happiness than we previously did?
Good question. Happiness is such a relative thing. It's such an amorphous thing. And I think it's privy to how they've chosen to define it, right?
Yeah.
Like anything else, right? I mean, you learn what it means to be happy. You're born with an innate emotion of happiness that's kind
Right.
of governed your brain. But then over time, that gets augmented by the cues you get from people around you. And if you are raised where people laugh a lot, you'll have one view on happiness. If you're raised in, a stodgier family that's more stoic, it might be different. Neither is wrong, but ultimately it's all relative, and it's kind of intertwined with your value system. I'll say, for all of my optimism about what this young generation that's coming up will bring to the table, my experiences with them in the workplace have not always been particularly impressive, because I see a lot of younger folks, very hung up on pay and on status and on social validation. Right now, is that just the people that were around me? Possibly. But it could also be that we're in an awkward sort of middle phase where, some folks just have growing up to do, and
Yeah.
that's normal. I have growing up to do as well, right? So it's I admire authors and researchers and anyone who tries to quantify or break down and really study happiness, because it feels like it's like the most esoteric thing possible. Look at the fact that you'll see studies that will gauge what are the happiest countries in the world.
Yeah.
And this is not funny, but it's a quirky little statistic that a lot of times the countries that show up highest will be Northern European countries, Scandinavia, also like Finland and other parts of Northern Europe, and those are also some of the countries that have the highest suicide rates.
Right.
So how does that square, right?
Right.
Very subjective.
Yeah. No, even within the U.S., Colorado, where we raised our family, is always one of the happiest places to raise a family, and it has one of the highest suicide rates in the nation. So, yeah, I don't know how you balance that, but I do think there is at least a movement or an awareness that it's okay to be happy, right? Like it's okay to pursue your personal happiness. That I just don't go through the motions of doing things today, and happiness just comes at the end of this destination when I reach a certain place. That happiness is enjoying the process of the good and the bad, right? Just finding the joy in things, and hopefully that's a lesson that we're teaching the younger people is to enjoy what you do. And it doesn't mean it's always going to be easy. And like we talked earlier, just showing up sometimes is the best you're going to be able to do for something. Just keep showing up and keep sticking at it. And eventually it's going to get you where you, maybe not where you thought you're going to be, but where you're supposed to be.
Right.
Right. We don't have to have such, like, I'm doing this and this and this to end up there. At least in my life, the best places I've ended up are when I didn't have control. I just kept showing up and working, and it kind of guided me where I eventually was supposed to be.
Yeah, there's an invisible hand that guides us, right? And people that have a strong faith, whatever religion they subscribe to, I think have a good sense of that. It doesn't require religion, I think, to have that sensibility. But I do find that more often than not, the wise people that I've met in my life tend to correlate with that ethos.
Okay. Social impact. Let me see. How did I say this? Social impact problem of technology. How do we balance that? How do we? It's kind of what we've been talking about. But how do we balance growing technology but not losing the human side of things, not losing the importance of knowing other people?
Yeah, I think we need to go to our principles of design and think about what are the basic human needs we're trying to meet. So take a product like ChatGPT. Um, I believe that product is designed to, augment understanding and intelligence in a way that is validated by just the growth of its user base, right? If you can move beyond the early adopters and you can get into that growth curve to where the masses are using a product, and a lot of them are even paying for a product, um, just to just to augment what they're able to do with a web browser and a laptop
Right.
or mobile, right? Um, you you are serving a public good. Now, human-centered design alone is not it's alone that's not the answer. I think it also, you need to have attention to the societal implications, and really, I mean, that means policymakers need to weigh in on this and think
Mm.
about, okay, so the in the meaty part of the bell curve, we're good. Take any technology, right? I
Right.
mean, I don't even need to list them. I think that the vast majority of technological innovations cater to that middle 90% really effectively, but those edge cases are really, really important, because if we see that creating photos and videos at scale is something that AI can do, yes, we should be worried about how deepfakes might be subverting elections, right? The same way, if we see that the smartphone, such a convenient device that saves us time and gives us so much intelligence, is also clearly, empirically driving uh, depression and
Mm.
suicidal behaviors in teenagers, then yeah, somebody needs to be thinking about that. And luckily on Capitol Hill, they're talking about these things. Are they being fast enough? No. Are they being effective enough? No. Do they look kind of foolish when they parade the tech leaders and put them in chairs and start hammering them with questions? Yeah, they do.
Yeah.
We don't yet have parity between industry and government on, we need intellectual parity there to properly regulate it the way it needs to be. And so
No,
in
that's a
lieu of that,
great
market
term.
forces, you know
And
what I mean?
and
Like,
no, 100% intellectual parity for sure.
and so in the absence of that intellectual parity, what's happening? Well, market forces take over. And you look at the FANG companies, the big seven that are basically carrying the entire stock market in the United States. They're doing whatever the hell they want because nobody actually knows how to stop them right now.
Right.
Luckily, it's not all scary, but I used to work at Google. I used to sell YouTube to clients, big nine-figure advertisers. And I have to accept in 2024 that I was part of a machine that was monetizing information and disinformation equally. Um,
Mm.
and with disinformation, there's also, sort of all the algorithmic rabbit holes that we send people down. There's a lot of evidence of radicalization of people just because they clicked on recommended links,
Yeah.
right? And so that's part of how I came to pivot my career to say, all right, I've learned a thing or two about my work and about myself, and this is part of why I want to try something new.
Nice. How was that pivot for you?
Um, a fascinating journey. It didn't all happen at once.
Yeah.
And you think about a career pivot, there's so many different levers you can pull. The job within the company, the company itself, the industry, not to mention the self that you bring to those jobs. The biggest pivot for me was going from ad tech to ed tech, which is, a cute way of, kind of expressing that transition. But in my mind, it went from monetizing demand, creating demand for products and services where it doesn't already exist. That's
Sure.
the name of the marketing. To in ed tech, effectively, not a lot of people are saying it, but we're trying to save a dying industry because I think that like our venerable education institutions are far too proud to ever admit that they are all sinking ships.
Right.
And the big ones that have the brand equity and can beat their chests, the only reason they can do that, it's not because they're innovating, it's because they're sitting on these massive, 11-figure endowments.
Right.
And that shouldn't be forgotten because education is common currency for everybody on this planet. It's how we get by in life. And if we don't stop and think about, especially in the last 40 to 50 years, and I'll speak to the US, we've let our priorities run amok a little bit. And so I think it's time, that's why I felt good about joining the cause and saying, let's use education as a way to connect not just the people that have the pedigree and the network and the funds to get a top tier education, but let's use knowledge, not the format of that knowledge. Let's use the knowledge itself to empower people. And it was really rewarding work. So I never looked back.
Okay. And how long have you been doing that now?
About 4 years now.
Okay. Still feeling good?
As if there's a moment where the rug is going to get pulled. I'm going to realize I'm again,
No.
crisis of conscience. Yeah, I feel good.
Yeah.
There's, the salesman in me, the marketer in me is always looking for more demand.
Yeah.
If you can tap into existing demand, you don't have to go out and create it, which is really expensive and really tiring. So, if I was working with a client that is selling chicken wings, well, there's a finite amount of demand for chicken wings. If I'm working in a business that is empowering people to take control of their careers and become gainfully employed to enter the middle class and raise a family, um, well, the landscape as I see it today, there's virtually limitless demand for that. Sadly, the demand is only increasing because more and more people are getting left behind.
Yeah. Interesting. What would you coach them on? How do they do that? Like real quick, how do they keep up with the changes going on? Because here's something that I find interesting, Paul, as we travel. So I don't know how much research you did, but we sold all our stuff in Colorado in 2021. And now my wife and I just live in our Airstream traveling around. Our kids are traveling. And it doesn't matter where we've been. I've never heard anybody say housing is affordable. And we've been in like 28 states now. And everywhere we go, the locals tell us the same thing. Oh, it's a great place, but man, we just can't afford to live here anymore. So what do we how do we get people to be able to get back in to that middle class?
Um, I think, there's a scientific way of looking at it, which is to say, the way economists would look at it, they're going to define parameters. And the research that I've seen suggests that it's been shrinking. And you look at the distribution of wealth, and you would say,
Yeah.
well, we need to create laws and set policy, and we need to take a long, hard look at our tax policy, capital gains. We need to look at all the loopholes that are exploited by the smartest people, the wealthiest people, to just get wealthier. Um, that that's a band-aid. I mean, that is looking at the speedometer without considering what's in the engine, right? So I think that we need to, part of it is a personal dialogue that we all have to have with ourselves around what's meaningful, right? And I mean, sometimes, like, in parts of the greater New York area, I'll be driving through a neighborhood where the houses are really run down, and you can see that the services are not adequate, right? Cracking sidewalks and yellow grass and not a grocery store around. But then you see, the parking lot to an apartment building, and there's all these Mercedes and Land Rovers, and it's just like, well, what are you spending your
Right.
money on? Right? Now, who am I to judge what a person
Right.
I don't know spends their money on? But I think we've allowed ourselves to take conspicuous consumption to this really grotesque level, where it's like the human need that we fill by speaking with our wallet has gotten way out of hand. So financial literacy is an important piece of that, right? Not just the common sense of, like, what's truly a need in this world and what's a want, but also the financial literacy to say, you just got your paycheck. Like the proverbial, like, don't take your paycheck to the bar before you get home to your family, right? I think there's a lot of, just sort of, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of psychosocial aspects that we need to really revisit. And pop culture is a part of that too. Look at the themes that we celebrate in pop culture. I mean, that's what people aspire to. So I've thrown out like 4 or 5 ideas. I bet if you really got me going, I could throw out another dozen.
Yeah.
Probably not the most coherent answer. It takes, I'm not a
No.
philosopher. You need a philosopher.
Yeah, I don't know. I think we need people just like you that have common sense ideas, and we all start at our houses, right? I think that's one of the, I don't want to say downside right now, but our focus tends to be external a lot when I think it should be internal, right? We focus externally for this person to solve a problem, or, oh, if this guy wins the election and my life's fixed, or if this guy wins, my life's doomed. And
Yep.
instead of going inside, right? And most of our issues, most of our concerns are best addressed by us.
Yep.
I'm
And
go ahead.
well, I just to build on that, I think it's because we've lost touch with ourselves that we find ourselves in this position, right? How often do we stop and think and pause and reflect, right? It's like when you're stopped at a red light. It's a classic use case anyone can relate to, right? People just whip out their phone. What could I consume in the next 15 seconds to make these 15 seconds as productive as possible?
Right.
Now, those 15 seconds, like pausing and just watching a bird hang out on an electric cable, right?
Yeah.
Like that clears your mind. That opens up a new thinking. Like it's just we've lost that. We've lost touch with ourselves, to your point.
Yeah, I agree. Paul, it's been an honor having you on the show, my friend. Where can our community stay in touch with you and help support the work you're doing?
Well, I'm active on LinkedIn. I believe I'm the only Paul Burani around. There's another guy in I don't think he's on LinkedIn. My website, my business is missionflywheel.com. That's where I do my work, but my work is just one part of me. So yeah, I'm always eager. Those are probably the two ways, but I think I suspect the people who tune into your show, Jerrod, are probably people that I would get along with. So open invite to connect.
All right. I love it, Paul. Thank you so much for joining us. It's been a true pleasure to meet you.
Likewise, I appreciate the opportunity, Jerrod.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.